every company says this, right? Too much data, analysis paralysis, or not even being able to like get to a decision because you can't get either the right data or you're not looking at it correctly. What I try to do is like back up and really say like, let's start with 5 or 10 really important insights that we have that we know drives lifetime value. So like, what are those most important things? How do we track those things that build into that? And then there's all these other things, and people like to ask questions, right? Because people, well, have we ever looked at this or have we ever looked at that? And you're like, we could, but we'll be here. Our data, analytics team might get to it in 8 months from now. So like, no, we're not going to look at that right now.
You're right. There's this weird paradox, which is the more accessible data is, the easier it is to delay a decision, right? Because you're kind of like, well, let's see one more card or whatever. And that's really expensive. Heidi, good to see you. And thanks so much for joining us on All Dots Connected today.
I'm excited to be here.
So I was really excited about this because our last conversation, we talked about something that you've done that speaks to one of the biggest challenges that I see for entrepreneurs, which is navigating the macro picture, right? And you've managed to do it. I was looking at doing some research for this, and you've done it in a way that's extraordinary because you started in 2013, right? So sort of, as we were sort of emerging from the Great Recession and all the challenges around that. And then you built something incredible. And then you did it again in 21 and 22 and 23. And so I think it's funny because so many, and I'm sure you know plenty of folks who had this happen too. We all have friends who managed to get going in a boom time and get all the way done. And I have a couple of friends who also managed to cash their stock before anything happened. But for the rest of us, they had to be able to do what you did and you have done, which is an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, I think that there is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, right? Like along the way. And so, and you can't control the environment, right? You're bound to it as a venture, especially as a venture-backed company. And there's cycles, and we all know that. And there's cycles also of what's hot and what's not. And D2C, at one point in time when we started, D2C wasn't even actually a term. It was probably coined a couple of years after we founded ThirdLove. And D2C was hot for a while, right? Just like AI today. And it's interesting, when you're part of that wave, it's awesome. And you're riding the wave and it feels great and things are working. And then all of a sudden you're crashing at the bottom with a wave trying to drown you like you're surfing, and you got to figure out how to get out of it. And it's not easy and it's painful. It's not the easiest thing in the world, and it's not the most fun thing in the world.
So let's take each of those in turn, because I think you did it in two different places. One was in the early startup phase, and then you did it in the growth phase, which is even more complicated. But let's start with this startup phase challenge, which is you're getting going. I mean, your background, variety of line positions and working in some larger companies and so on. But I think this is your first one. So you're underway, and everybody thinks you're brilliant. Tell us a little bit about that challenge of product market fit when alongside a frothy investment market.
Yeah, well, I don't know that everyone thought I was brilliant, and I thank you for saying that. But no, I mean, I actually think the opposite. I mean, I remember the early days of pitching ThirdLove, and people thought we were crazy for starting an online bra company. One of the questions we got from investors at that point in time, trying to raise our seed, was like, "Why would a woman buy a bra online? It's so hard to fit." And and it was really this trying to just get someone to understand like that we could actually sell bras online, which was like a really basic idea, but was still highly differentiated in the current market. So, we are, at the end of the day, we're a product company and we have to have great product. That's really where we started. We also built technology that really helped a woman find her fit. And that was always like a crucial coming together of two things that were very differentiated in the bra space. We did that, in a beta way, meaning we had one or two great bras. We had kind of a sizing app we were using at the time. And, the women who found us loved our product, but there weren't many of them. And I remember sitting around before we had raised our A, and again, times were different back then of what a seed and an A was and what the expectations were. But really at that point in time, we had not found product market fit. We were sitting around a table. There was maybe 10 of us that were at ThirdLove at the time. And we basically said also, like we said to our team, like we either find product market fit in the next 6 to 12 months, or like ThirdLove is not going to be around because there's no way we're going to get funding. And we really, really took some time to say, what is holding the customer back? Like, really, what is it? And at the time, we were running these static ads on Facebook that were like, the world's most comfortable bra, right? Things like that. And really, what it was is women didn't believe us. Like, they had never heard of ThirdLove, and they didn't believe there could be a better option. And we said to ourselves, like, how do we solve that? Like, how can we solve that digitally, right? Because we were fully D2C at the time. And we came up with a crazy idea, and it was to give the bra to a woman for free. So literally send it to her, like de-risk the situation and be like, the proof will be when you put it on, right? Because most of the time in a bra store, if you take off the tags and you wear the bra, you cannot return it. That's on average a typical return policy. And we said, we believe in our product so much that you can just pay $2.99 or whatever it was for shipping. We'll send you the bra. You can wear it, wash it for 30 days. And if you love it, you pay us the full price. And if you don't, we'll pay for return shipping. And that try before you buy program, and I know everyone who's listening to this is like, yeah, well, Amazon does a try before. I'm like, yeah, but we did it first, you know? So we were, I think, the first consumer company that truly created a try before you buy program where someone actually got to use the product in that way in apparel. And that really unlocked a growth cycle for us that we were on a wave. We were on a wave for a while. I mean, our first probably 2 million customers came through that program.
Wow. And you also did it without a net because it's not like you had $100 million in the bank from an investor.
No, and it was risky because if also people didn't keep the bra, right? Like we were, it's not like you can resell it after someone wears it. But lucky for us, like the fact that we had invested in product and had great product really allowed us to, 80% of women plus kept the bra. So that worked within, the margin structure and how much we were paying for ads and all the things to make us profitable on first order. So
how did you guys figure out that was the problem? What was the methodology for that?
I mean, we tried to do, when I say survey work, it was sort of like talking to people we knew, like talking to our demo and trying to understand like why they wouldn't try something new. And it was around like this idea of not believing it. And also women are lazy shoppers. It's not like buying a handbag or something like that. It's not as exciting maybe. And so I think you got to give someone a really compelling reason to like make the purchase to try it. And that was a really compelling offer that got someone's attention.
Were the numbers good out of the gate on that? I mean, in other words, so it worked right away? Because of course, if it hadn't, you probably would have had to shut it down.
It worked right away. I mean, we had built back in the day, we had built our own front end and back end. And so we had to scrappily like put together a way to like collect credit card data and store it. I mean, it was janky. It was really, really janky, but we put together this funnel and put the ads in market on Facebook. And it worked. It worked right away. And we knew we were onto something. And that really became the thing we optimized over the next probably 2 to 3 years, really like that funnel and the shipping charges and how long she was able to wear the bra, like all those minutia of like conversion optimization, that became really what we did as a company. And so this idea of focus, and if you hit something, right? And I always say this, like if you hit something, like you want to keep doing it and optimize it and own it. I think a lot of founders get really distracted of like, well, we're going to do these other things. And it's like, no, do the thing that's working and like make it better and own it and protect it if you can.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. I think maybe it helped in your previous experience that you didn't get fooled that it was easy. Like when you hit something that's working and that it's easy, you think, oh, that other things will be easy as well. But they're not.
They're not. No. And I would say since then, I couldn't name one thing that's been as easy as that was. But getting there, we almost died. Like that was 18 months of 2 years of trying to find product market fit. I mean, we had tried 50 ideas, probably more, and none of it had worked. So it is the true story. It's like perseverance, trying many things, not getting disheartened. And maybe you'll be so fortunate and so lucky to actually find that thing, because there's not many for each business. There's not 50 things out there that are going to work. There's a couple.
There's a couple. There's a couple. How did you guys keep going? I mean, this is not, we talk more about growth stage, but the startup stage, nobody gets to the growth stage unless they do what you did
Yeah.
there. How did you do it?
Um, I think there are always dark days. For me and my co-founders, luckily, I think we mostly didn't have dark days on the same day. I think all of us had dark days, right? But that's why you have co-founders. And I also, couldn't have done it by myself. It would have been too much stress and too hard, and just one disappointment after another, one misstep after another, one questioning, was everyone right when they said this was a terrible idea? But a lot of it is this idea of like, actually deep down, like, no, I think this is a great idea and I'm kind of going to prove it. And we're going to do this. And there's so much energy in an early stage startup. I mean, it's one of the things I just got shivers actually, like thinking about the energy. It's so fun because everyone's just like so in it, and there's just a real energy of like working late and doing the next thing and not being disappointed. And all of that changes in the growth stage. It becomes something so different. And I do miss that excitement and energy and those wins, those little wins that like every day there's one little thing that kind of keeps you going.
Right. Well, and as you get bigger, the little things are not enough they're just little things again, right? So let's talk about that energy and that culture. So the culture, it sounds like you guys had a test learn, sense and respond culture early. And I presume that you maintain that, but it's also that enthusiasm, that intensity, which is what I've found often is, it's growth state. People who are capable of scaling and growing something have to have that. So let's fast forward a little bit. You guys it's working great. And we're also during COVID or around that time, an enormous amount of capital comes to the fore in commerce and so on. And so it's go, go, go. You guys experienced that, it sounded like.
Yeah. I mean, we were, not, and I don't mean to say it in a bragging way, like we were hot, right? Like we were like hot, and
Yep.
we were well known, and all the big guys knew who we were. They were tracking us, right? We were important and the one to watch. And so we took out an open letter to Victoria's Secret in 2018, and put a billboard up about it, and and we had such momentum. We were sort of the talk. And so in addition to it being a moment for us as a brand where we had really taken off, it also was the fact that we were in the peak of D2C. So in this moment of time where everyone was saying spend to grow the brand, and everything else will follow. And so we did what, our investors agreed upon. I remember, taking out a huge national, TV campaign in 2018, and we lost a lot of money that year. Right. And I think we were growing like crazy, and we were spending money behind that. And that was what everyone was doing. And when that came to an end, you have a business model that isn't sustainable in the long run unless you can be, self-fund it. And by that, I mean cash flow positive, right? So, we were doing what everyone was doing.
Yeah. And then it's kind of turned on a dime. And that's my experience. That's like one day they were like, nope, I know we said that, but we never meant it really. Did you get one of those?
Yeah, it was sort of like, well, times have changed. And like, I remember talking to some investors and I was like, so is there a chance of getting, and they're like, no. Like I couldn't even get the question out of my mouth. It was like, and it's like, okay. And then you're like, all right, well, this is a different animal. I mean, when you're in the stage of growing and spending and brand building and acquiring lots of customers, and you're on that path, like to go from that to being like, oh no, you're expected to be like what I would call more of a real adult company, right? With, really thoughtful spending and and really thinking through like profitability on first order, like all these things that we weren't doing, during this like high growth stage.
So let's talk about that a moment because it's just such a. So I think people know this. Unfortunately, I know you and I know people who this is true for who are very, very capable operators. A lot of people we know didn't get through that. And this happened overnight, right? You guys were particularly prominent in this regard, right? I mean, you guys had an enormous run. But making that shift, walk us through how you pulled it off, because I think, as I said, a lot of people didn't find their way through. So what were the, cultural data, insight, organization? Help me understand some of the things you did to be able to make that transition. And there's a limited amount of time, I would imagine, right? I mean, you guys were probably burning a meaningful amount of money when this all happened.
I think, first and foremost, it was getting aligned with the leadership team and really making sure they deeply understood, like, where are we in terms of market conditions, and where does ThirdLove sit within that, and where do we need to get to, and what's the timeline for us to do that. And that wasn't so hard. I did have a team that had worked at a lot bigger retail companies that had depth of experience and obviously had seen other, market conditions that weren't dissimilar from where we were at. I think the rest of the company was harder. And it was hard. I mean, we had to do layoffs. We had to restructure. We had to really deeply look at our marketing budget. We had to become more efficient in every single thing we did. And we just like worked down a list, and it took, truly it took a year probably. I mean, I think we made a lot of progress in 6 months. But I would say it took, 12 to 18 months to really kind of get to where we needed to be, which is actually not that much time in the grand scheme of things, but it was communication. I mean, I did all hands and over again talked about, the idea of growth and profitability and what those things are and why they were important and how we were going to achieve those. And the idea that that's this mindset, we had to shift our mindset to say, we're going to really focus on things and initiatives that allow us to drive at those 2 KPIs, and explain what those were, what that means, right? And so I do think everyone today, of course I can say it 2 years later or 3 years later, however long it's been, probably 3 now, but I think everyone at ThirdLove has a deep ingrained understanding of that's what we do every day at ThirdLove. We drive profitable growth. But that, that took time.
So that was over communicate.
I think starting with that and then really having targets that we needed to hit so that people could understand how, if we're going to think about cutting costs and, what does that mean and how do we do it? And really taking a deep look at, the really basic stuff, like every piece of software and how many seats do we have and how are we using it and what's the ROI? I mean, how many agencies do we have? What are they? I mean, it was every little thing. And you start to, it's a good time. It actually was a good exercise for me. I learned so much through that process, as much as I had learned through the first process of scaling.
Yeah. It's also, I don't know, you experience this. It's important to try to not be too hard on yourself or your team, in the sense that some of the stuff you find as part of that process is you're like, how did we ever think this was a good idea? Right.
Oh, 100%, which is great. And that's a great learning.
That's a great learning. Exactly. Exactly. But you definitely have, I just remember like shuddering a little bit, the money that got spent. And, in our, actually, the faster you're doing this and the greater the pressure to scale, the more type of that stuff, sneaks in for sure.
100%.
And you guys you grew incredibly fast and you're able to do that. It's interesting. I found this to be true. And I wonder if you found this too. It's a difficult thing for the company. It's very difficult. If you had executives who were able to do this, and folks within the company are able to do this, that's a testament to them, because there are a lot of people who are just built for growth, frankly, or just built for working in that other construct. But asking people to change like that culturally and then, individually that's a big ask for a lot of people.
It is. But times were hard. So I do think, right, there's markets where people, it's more flexible in open job markets, and then there's less. And so I do think a benefit we had was people still loved the brand and our mission, and what we had set out to do was not changing. The DNA of our company, how we service our customers, the importance of great product and great experiences, the importance of having an amazing, website and all these things were still really important. We just had to be smarter about how we were achieving those goals. And so, but yeah, I agree. I mean, it wasn't right for everyone.
Yeah, right. So in the midst of this, and of course, another component that a lot of direct-to-consumer businesses were looking at pre this shift, but then certainly as part of it, is moving to a multi-channel strategy, and how important that is on a lot of fronts. Talk us through a little bit about why you thought that was important, given your model, and also, as you scale, how that was a critical part of being able to get to profitable growth.
Yeah. So as a lot of people know, right, with digital becoming overall a more expensive and also not reliable environment where there are many changes that are made that affect advertisers that you can't predict. It just made it much harder channel just to manage today than it was 10 years ago. And so I think that's one piece of it. The other piece of it was structurally, when I set out to build ThirdLove, my main thesis, like early days of the seed, was women don't want to go to the store, or I should say, busy women, they just want to buy a bra online. You can buy a lot of stuff online. Like why can't you buy a great bra online and like get the right size? And that holds true. And we have 5-6 million customers, however many, to prove that. But there are also a lot of women who aren't going to buy a bra for the first time online. They want help getting size. They want to touch and feel the product. They want to try it on. They want to know they're buying the right thing. And as we did a lot more survey work and really kind of understood more deeply, not only our customers, but people who knew ThirdLove but hadn't converted, that was a top reason why women hadn't tried us. It wasn't anything about the brand so much or the product, right? It was really like, we don't want to buy a bra online for the first time, which is a pretty, basic insight, but brick and mortar, I guess, is not anything close to being extinct. And yeah, so it was really about leaning into that and again, testing. So we did a lot of testing the past couple years on our owned retail stores, and what size store, what type of merchandise, what kind of experience. I mean, we originally thought when we did our first store in New York City, which was a pop-up right before COVID, we had it very tech heavy. So what we thought our customers wanted was to experience our fitting room kind of data-driven experience that recommends the right bra size and style to her, even if she was in store. So we had iPads up front. It was very, just very high tech. And what we came to quickly realize is that's not what she wants when she walks into a store. She wants one-on-one interaction with a fit stylist in person, and she doesn't want to be on an iPad. That's why she's there. And so, evolving our retail experience to a place that it makes it great for the customer. It's different than the online experience. And then really understanding how big the store has to be, all these things. It's very much a test and learn model that takes a lot longer than online, but is really exciting in its own right. And if done correctly, I really think is hugely important to our brand and our future growth. Wholesale's the same. I mean, wholesale's a bit different because we're not controlling the environment, but the right kind of partners, driving trial, people shop where they shop.
Yeah, totally. So as you describe that and thinking about that I imagine being in that room where it happened, right? About how you're going to initially launch and so on. And something I think I see, and maybe you can confirm this in the folks who work with you, and we saw this at Idealia as well, mixing these two worlds, which is deep retail expertise and with sort of e-commerce tech and so on. Ideally we had this issue. A critical part of our success was actually figuring out how to buy right. And so we had Ross stores and TJX buyers, which are essentially the engines of those business working with us, but they were working alongside people who really came from another planet. And it was one of our real challenges to get that. They were always nice to each other, but they didn't necessarily understand how to connect. That was, I'm sure, true in your business too. In a situation like this, how did you guys navigate that?
I really always try to focus on customer first, right? So, right, this idea of there are insights that come from everyone, and there's very strong data points that people can hold up as the reason why, we need to do XYZ. And that's all great. And that should be used in the decision process. But at the end of the day, if we really focus on the lens of the customer and what that person needs and wants, then I think you can have a meeting of the minds. And that may mean, the evolution of what something looks like digitally evolves or needs to be different or it doesn't. And also, I think the insight sharing over time, if you can get that happening, is really powerful. And I have seen it work. I do also agree, especially with new channels. Like for us right now, because they're new, we don't have huge teams working on them. We have a couple of people working on each thing. And as it scales, those teams will grow. So you have also a lot of the leaning in, the sort of like leaning in with, 10 or 20% of your time to do something new, which is exciting. But again, to me, it's really about that positioning of what does the customer need and how do we deliver that?
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so let's shift a little bit around thinking about data and how you guys have used data to make decisions along the way and how to be able to navigate, you know, I won't say choppy waters, but certainly a relatively turbulent environment, and also scaling too, as you have different needs as you scale. So talk a little bit about how you guys think about using data to make decisions and how that plays within your org.
Yeah, I mean, we've always prided ourselves on being a data-driven company. I think we are. I think we also got to a point where our data, we actually had too much data, and I think every company says this, right? Too much data, analysis paralysis, or not even being able to like get to a decision because you can't get either the right data or you're not looking at it correctly. So again, what I try to do is like back up and really say like, what are the like, let's start with 5 or 10 really important, insights that we have that we know drives lifetime value, right? So like, what are those most important things? How do we track those things that build into that? And then there's all these other things, and people like to ask questions, right? Because people, well, have we ever looked at this or have we ever looked at that? And you're like, we could, but we'll be here. Our data, analytics team might get to it in 8 months from now. So like, no, we're not going to look at that right now. So I think it's really important. And so we've elevated data to a point where it's at in an executive level. We get together once a month on like what are the bigger data questions or reports or analysis that we're doing, because most of them are cross-functional, and we have to stack rank, right, how important they are. Just like you prioritize, what you're building on your website or what you're testing. Like to me, data is the same level of importance, and the alignment has to be there so that we can say no to things.
Yeah, an organization that has data more available has a tendency to delay decisions, right?
Mhm.
Because you're kind of like, I'll see one more card. And so there's this paradox of availability of information or a data-driven culture creating indecision, which is, I think, what you're referring to. And it's so stack racking it. If there's your comment about stack racking what you're going to spend time on, embedded in that, of course, is another part of that, which is like, what do we think is really important right now?
Yeah, and what can we action on? Like data can tell you a lot of things, but also, are you even able to action on the insight? Like we did this in the early days. Like we would get these insights and it's like, okay, great, but yeah, we can't do the XYZ thing. Okay. So we spent 2 weeks on that project. Like why are we doing that? So yeah, I mean, I think data, we've tried today to have data in the hands of the business owners and more detailed projects at our analytics team so that things can move at pace. But and this is your world, but yeah, it's a hard question to have like the right. There's a hard tasked to have the right data and be looking at it correctly too. Because I do think there's also ways you can sometimes be looking at something. Really, when you dive in, it may not be exactly kind of what you thought it was. So, but we use data. I mean, we use data in product development. We use data, of course, in marketing and creative even. And, across the board we do. And it's really about, yeah, like, as I said, I think it's really about focus.
Focus. And you said something really important, which I think is easy to lose, which is it actionable? Can I actually do anything with this? And if it can't, if it's likely that I can't, put it aside, put it in the parking lot or whatever. And so this combination of, can I look at this the right way? Is it definitive enough? And then can I do something about it? I think is a great framework to think about it.
And one more thing we should add to that is what's
Hmm.
what's the ability to make a big impact, right? Like, how
Yes, right.
big is the issue? How big is the problem we're looking at? Like, are we talking about 5% of customers or 50% of customers? Like, what is it? Because obviously scale of problem solving at growth stage is incredibly important.
Totally, totally. And also, some of these things reach deep into the P&L and have a huge impact on enterprise value. A 3% improvement,
Totally.
in your marketing spend, or 5% improvement in your marketing spend is enormous because you can get reinvested and you can get that a scaling effect for sure. As opposed to, I mean, it takes 3% anywhere you can get it, but sometimes 3% is more than other times, basically.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so here you guys are. You found your way through, as you point out. It's a couple years in the rear view. That challenging year, and as you think about what we see coming now, the turbulence doesn't seem to abate. That's I don't know. I guess every generation thinks they have it tough, but it seems like we've had a lot over the past 10 years or so. How do you think about the next phase for you guys, and what you're going to find, given where you are now, the success you've had and some of the challenges you have? Where do you think the next big frontier is in terms of challenges for the business?
Yeah, I think it'll be, and I know AI is the hot topic, but I think it's really important, right, to understand and be thinking through where that can be leveraged. So in the same way, in the early days of ThirdLove, we said, like, how are we going to disrupt the online shopping experience for bras and make it something better? Like, there's a lot of things that I think we'll be able to do over time that makes our experience for our customers better. And I can give like 2 examples of things that we're doing today that can scale. And again, like, that's the big thing, right? So one is customer service, right? And working with a partner where, we're 50+% of chats are now handled by AI. And that has happened over the past 6 months, and it's not perfect. And we're really working to make it excellent. But certainly a ton of potential there to actually get really nuanced over time, which is exciting, right? And another thing that we're really working on is, how does AI come into the creative side, right? Through copy. So this idea of copy and training tone, and how we put that more into our marketers' hands instead of creative, because marketers know their channel and we know what performs. And so how can we iterate on that and not lose the brand, but ideate on that? And so I think there's exciting things going on there. And we're exploring models and photography and images in more body sizes, which I am so excited about, because I've always had the vision at ThirdLove that I wanted, anytime somebody clicked on their size, that they saw someone relevant to them, because that's what makes it personalized. That's what makes it excellent. Unfortunately, as a company, I can't shoot 65 different models for every product in every color. Like, it doesn't work like that. And I would love to. I would have loved to do that over the past 10 years, but that never has happened. And this may give us a real opportunity to be able to actually supply that experience where you can truly see it on someone that is very similar to your body shape. And I think that alone could be, like, just really revolutionary for the shopping experience.
Yeah, I think in two ways. We saw this too. We hired, ideally we hired, I think we were the number one or number two. Us and Guilt, I guess, were the 2 people who hired more models than anybody. And we spent a lot of time, because we represented so many different types of brands, trying to figure out how to get the right look is quite challenging, in fact. And by the way, we weren't talking about size. We are just trying to figure out how to make it resonate there. And but I think this idea of finding a way to emotionally connect, right? Because my wife Jess, who worked at Andela, she was president of Andela, and
Mhm.
they brought African programmers to U.S. companies, and she had this beautiful story about people being able to see a hero that looked like them, and I think it's a very similar idea here, which is that's validating in so many important ways, um, and uh, I think it shows up both in honoring the mission, but also shows up in the numbers, because when people see that, they feel like you get it. So that's a fascinating thing. How's it going? Are you in the uncanny valley? Is it still too weird? Has it popped out the other side yet?
I think we're almost there. It's something that, we looked at 6 months, a year ago, I don't know when, and it was, it was a hard no at the time after we kind of explored it. And now I think we're going to get to a place where later this year, we will start to see some of it roll out. So, it's exciting.
What Let's talk a little bit about the state of the markets right now. Um, uh, in the sense that if you were to start a company like this today, and I'd be curious whether last time I checked, it's still, the direct to consumer funding and on the VC side is down 90%, 95%. I
I would
mean,
say like
it's,
kind of non-existent, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, right. I was going to say 97. That seems too dramatic, but maybe it isn't. Do you do you see a path? I mean, it's obviously different when you did it. Do you think that there's a way for this to work again, to create big brands and big companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think what everyone is forced to do today, right, is to drive profitability much more quickly and or from the very beginning. And so that is challenging in some respects, but also great in some respects if people can get through that hurdle. But a positive today is that what I see through angel investing, and I've invested in, probably 25 consumer companies, all early stage, not necessarily in apparel, but across the board, is that they're omnichannel much earlier. So, which has been great for them. And it's something that I look back on. We were in Bloomingdale's in 2015, and we walked away from that relationship because it was taking so much time. And D2C was growing really quickly. And so, there was a reason why we made that decision, but it wasn't the long-term right decision to make. And so I guess there's some positive aspects of the current environment and some negative, but everything has cycles. So of course there'll be brands created, right now. And there may be some of the best brands that are created because it is more competitive, and perhaps like less people are going to go into it, which I think also is important. There was a point in time, a couple of years ago where, I mean, the amount of new brands being launched every day was just there isn't enough money, consumer money, to spend at so many places, especially if the product's not differentiated and solving a unique need. So yeah, I think it's really, today's more what doesn't exist, and people are going to create that, and there'll be some big wins, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think that's well said. I mean, the other piece to that, which is obvious, is that you're being polite about it. There's an enormous amount of things that really had no business being there at all, and they were getting funded. I mean, it makes this distinction between a hot market where investors are funding things because they want to spread the bets around, and the opportunity, the potential for differentiation and product market fit, and those things can get out of whack. And the other thing that happened a lot too. I mean, there were some really really good businesses that got way ahead of their cap table and couldn't grow into it.
100%. And when you have, even today, I mean, AI, like, not all these companies, I mean, it's kind of going to be the same replay, right? Like, in a different type of way. Like, it inherently, it's not everyone's going to win. But it is really interesting because it's so hard to get funding today in consumer that people aren't doing it as much, right? Like, why would you? But maybe you just decide to eke it out and bootstrap it. And I have seen businesses like that, and they can drive good profitability a lot quicker because they figure out something that works for them.
Right. I mean, well, it's if the start conditions and a lot, putting aside VC venture capital as a funding source, the traditional mechanism for this was, the starting conditions, very, very high gross margin, right? And a relatively low return rate, a real differentiator, some sort of, brand element that allowed them to be able to cut through the chatter. And then good discipline in terms of execution, right? I mean, it's often challenging. We've seen this a lot where, you can have somebody, and actually it's often true. You have a really capable creative mind, and when coupled with someone who really knows how to operate, you can build amazing things. We were talking to very early on Tom Brown. This was many, many years ago when I was still working in that area. And, Tom is a great example of somebody who's just a brilliant, brilliant guy, but the business of running a fashion brand could not be further from that creative capability, right? And he went through a few different things and was then ultimately able to end up with someone who helped him find his way through, and they built a really valuable brand and deliver some incredible things. But it is about getting the right team in place. And the normalized situation around funding is people underestimate the gift that it is, because it does hopefully save you from wasting time. I mean, we also know plenty of people who, might have put in 5-6 years because of a frothy market and they probably weren't going to get all the way through. And that's a lot of time and money wasted.
Yeah. And that's why if if you've the passionate founder, right, who deeply believes in that mission or product, like that usually, if they can find, the right type of partnership and operations to go along with it, like brands are powerful, right? Like the idea of brand today has evolved, but it's still a really powerful thing in our society. And it will continue to be, and it will come back like everything it does. Like the value of the brand isn't going anywhere.
Right. Well, and generally what happens is there are people who come through each cycle and grow to be large. You guys are, a happy example of that. And then the cycle restarts because there are a few people who have that right starting condition, or have that capability. They show the promise, and it pulls a lot of things behind it. And inevitably it gets overinvested. I mean, that's, the nature of it. Right. So uh, I've been through a couple cycles myself, and after you've done it a couple times, when you have that meeting, you're like, you're not really listening to anything I'm saying. This is you're investing on the money you made in the last deal. It doesn't really have anything to do with me. And you're like, all right, well, there's a market top for you for sure. So let's jump over to something else, if that's okay. We have a few minutes left. Do you think, is there any story that comes to mind where, after you guys were jamming along and putting aside the macro picture, where things got weird and you guys got stuck? And maybe there wasn't. I mean, I don't know, but is there a moment where you as a CEO and a founder where you're like, oh shit, like everything, it's not working, and we have to reset. Did you have any of those along the way beyond the big one to profitability?
The example that I was thinking of is when try before you buy stopped working. And all good
Oh,
things come
wow.
to an end, right? As
Right.
we were talking about, like you have the thing, it's working great. It's churning along. And then all of a sudden you start looking at the data and you're like, what's happening? And so what ended up happening around, I think it was probably like 2019-ish, was that the customers that were coming through the Try Before You Buy program were much less profitable and had a much lower LTV than the ones who had come that first couple years. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, like, were we targeting incorrectly, right? which could have still been part of it. I'm not fully convinced that targeting was perfect, but not a ton had changed there. And so I do think that program sort of like we had reached some amount of saturation, and that was a big change for us. So we actually like pulled down try before you buy over a period of time and really, removed it. I mean, we don't have it today. And that inherently, because that was the core of our new customer
Yeah, right.
acquisition, to switch that. Now, look, the brand was a lot bigger. We had a huge, customer base at that point, and we were able to use referrals and implement a loyalty program and start to do some other things that are more big company-ish, and just kind of shift how we kind of thought about it. And what we did was we took some of the elements of the Try Before You Buy program and put them into how we guarantee our products. So this idea of a perfect fit guarantee, how we ensure that someone, if they're paying for the product up front, feels really confident in that purchase. And so we did a lot of evolution of that. But I mean, that what I just said, that took 18 months again, right? Like identifying the problem, digging into the problem, making the decision to turn it off was gut-wrenching.
Terrifying. Right. Right. And you found something on the other side. Now, was that driven by a focus on current customers and using that as a foundation to allow you the next thing, or how did you guys? What did it get replaced by, or was it a series of things?
Yeah, it was. So we really relied a lot more on, we have an online fitting room that sort of guides somebody. So 90% of our customers do the fitting room because they want that help. So what we did was we relied more heavily on that as a way to convince a customer and kind of walk her through the process versus relying on the Try Before You Buy program for new customers. And so we kind of shifted our focus, but still had an acquisition funnel. But yeah, we had to do it. We had to make change. And then to your point that you said earlier, like there wasn't one big thing that I could name that replaced the Try Before You Buy program. There's probably 20 things we did that all incrementally
Got you back.
back to where we were. Yeah.
That's scary. That's scary. it's a, it's another place that we often see, and it makes sense that there were a series of things. It was such a linchpin to what got you to that point, but it's an immutable law that whatever's working today is going to stop working, and you could find the end of it. And actually, oddly, if you're succeeding very rapidly and you're scaling fast, it happens quicker. And that time scale, being able to at least, you were able to do it in 18 months and still have the business. What year was that? How long ago was that?
I think it was like 2019 into 2020. So kind of like an interesting time for obvious reasons as well.
Yeah, yeah. But it also may be some cover in there too, because a lot of other dollars were available. That didn't happen at the same moment that you were trying to get your
Correct.
your
Yeah.
round done
Thank
or
God.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank God. It's right. It's not for the faint-hearted. This whole thing, I'll tell you.
No, there's often the pit in the stomach, right? And you got to make calls, and there is never complete data. So it's like you're making a call based on data and like what you believe and like where you think things are going. And sometimes you're right, and sometimes you're not.
Yeah. Well, but it's important to make the distinction between doing that, which is all we can all ever do the best playbook to play is that, but versus what happens to a lot of people, which is no decision is made. And that'll kill you. Right. And so I think that's an important distinction here. I mean, you guys have found your way through, you think about all of the decisions along the way, all the activities along the way and so on. And you guys this is your 12th year, 13th year?
I mean, we launched our selling in 2014. So we just had our 10th like anniversary of selling product. But yeah, it's been over a decade now.
And how do you, last question. First of all, such a delight. I had so much fun on our last call, and now we managed to record it, which is even better. But 10 years in, how is it that you're able to still bring that kind of energy and to it? Because that's a real challenge for entrepreneurs too. Is it can get hard to keep going.
Yeah, and I think there were definitely times when we were trying to get to profitability where I was like, this is not like Is this what I signed up for? Okay. You know, but yeah, I think I'm an optimist. I think every founder is. I always believe that the next great thing is around the corner. We just have to find it. I um and I love having a company that I see the impact we make. I mean, I read through reviews every morning, and you see women writing in with amazing messages
Mm,
about finding something after they've had a surgery, just every life stage that we impact, from someone being pregnant or someone, looking for a front closure bra because they have limited mobility. I mean, there's all these little stories, right? And we make positive impact in women's lives. And that's really exciting. And the more products and sizes we've launched, the more people we're able to impact. And um, and that is probably, I guess, what keeps me going. But it's exciting. I mean, we were talking about this before. Like I'm really excited about omnichannel. I think it's really fun. And that gives me energy too, to be doing something new.
yeah. So I just want to put a pin in that, which is that you read the customer reviews every day, every morning. You start your day that way.
Yeah, usually because we have different places that I go, and I read product reviews. So especially for new product launches, I'm always reading like what are people saying about it. And of course our product team's using that, but there's a lot of nuggets in there too. And if you're not doing that as a consumer company, I think you're missing some really big insights.
Yeah. That was spectacular. Thank you.